Is anyone in the White House hiding information about the president's health or his ability to do the job day to day?
Absolutely not.
Given the fact that it's more than a bad night when his political future is threatened, would he be willing to provide more medical information? Would he be willing to have Dr. O'Connor provide more to answer these questions?
Look, Kelly O, certainly understand the question, appreciate the question, but what we have provided has been very transparent.
But it's
has
not
been
recent.
has
and
been
the country watch.
But February was this year. It wasn't too long ago. It was indeed this year, and we provided transparent report, a thorough
There
report.
were many Americans who were concerned about his capacity. Was he okay? What happened? And we've now gone several days where he has only done teleprompter comments.
Okay.
He has not taken questions. I know you've announced a press conference.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. An interview. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
But there is a period of time here where the public is trying to understand what happened.
Yeah.
And the president could help to answer that by engaging with us in an unscripted way right now.
So let me just say a couple of things. There's a couple of things that you said that I do want to address. Number one, less than an hour after the debate, he went and he engaged directly with the American people, right? He went to a watch party. He was in a room with hundreds of supporters who watched the debate. And when he walked in, they cheered him on. And he did a photo line with them for some time. Some of your colleagues had an opportunity to speak to these supporters. He did that. And that was something that he was able to do right after. And then we stopped at a Waffle House, as some of you all know, and spoke to a packed restaurant. So he spent some time there. Then the next day, he went to North Carolina, spoke in front of hundreds of supporters there who said, "We support you, Joe. We love you, Joe." And so he was able to do that. In those 2.5 days or so after the debate, he went to 4 states and engaged with supporters, engaged with American people, everyday people, heard directly from them. And let's not forget, when we landed in North Carolina, I think it was like 2 a.m. in the morning, he engaged with supporters there as well. So the president has been out there. He's been listening to supporters. It's something that he loves to do, not just supporters, but American people out there, everyday people who appreciate what he does, who wants to hear more from him, as you just stated, and got that opportunity to do just that. I think it matters that he's going to do an interview on Friday. I think it matters that he's going to go to Wisconsin and do that, right? Engage with everyday people. We're going to continue to do that. Nothing has changed in that regard. We're going to continue to be out there. He's going to be in Pennsylvania as well this weekend, as I just stated.
And one more. We're reporting that Hunter Biden has been in some meetings with senior advisors. Why is the president's son involved?
So a couple of things I saw that reporting as I was coming out. So a couple of things there. Look, the president, as you know, is very close to his family. This is a holiday week, 4th of July. He spent time with his family, as you all know, and reported at Camp David. Hunter came back with him and walked with him into that meeting, that speech prep, and he ended up spending time with his dad and his family that night. That is basically what happened. It is a week where there's going to be more family members who are going to come to the White House. I'm sure you'll see some of them on 4th of July. Many more are expected to be here.
No issue with family being in the White House. The question, though, would be, is he participating in meetings with senior advisors?
What I can say is that he came back with his dad from Camp David. He walked him into the speech prep, and he was in the room. That I can tell you, he was in the room. Anything else coming out of that reporting, I can't speak to, but I can say that, he's close to his family, which is not unusual. They were together at Camp David. They came back together. You're going to see a lot more family this week. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Karine, I want to go back to that question that Pelosi raised earlier today.
Sure.
Pelosi said it's a legitimate question to ask if this is an episode or this is a condition. Which one is it?
Well, what I can tell you is that he had a cold and a bad night. I would not see this as an episode. I would see this as what it was and what we believe it to be, which is it was a bad night. And he did, on top of that, he had a cold. And that is the reality of the situation. That is the reality of what happened that night.
You've certainly seen the reporting out there that this is not just a standalone instance, that other people are saying that this has happened before. One, do you see these as legitimate questions? And also, are you being straight with the American people on this?
I see it as a legitimate question. I do. And I have said it is a fair question to ask. The president sees it as a legitimate question. And I think also the president saying, I am not a young man. I'm not as a smooth talker as I used to be. I don't walk as easily as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. I mean, the president is admitting and saying, and this is not the first time, right? He's talked about his age. He's joked about his age many times before. And so you heard that directly from, and we are acknowledging what people are seeing. But we do believe this was in this instance, it was a bad night.
Is he disabled?
No, and let me finish with your colleague, please. And I know, but shouting out, come on, you know better, come on.
Just one final question. Immediately after the debate, we started to hear the concern from Democrats on Capitol Hill, calling it just flat out a disaster. Why didn't the president immediately personally reach out to leaders on Capitol Hill, like Leader Jeffries and Leader Schumer?
Look, I can say this. Right after the debate, we were on a 2.5-day swing, 4 states. The president was out there hearing directly from the American people, engaging directly from the American people. Obviously, he respects the Democratic leadership. It is leadership there that has helped him deliver for the American people an unprecedented record on behalf of Americans across the country. So we appreciate them for obviously. But he was out there. He was out there directly with supporters, engaging with them, whether it was at a tarmac, whether it was at a rally, whether it was at a watch party or a fundraiser. And I think that's important to note too. And he was hearing from them. But at the same time, those leaders, Democratic leadership, was hearing from members of his team, high-level senior members of his team. It's not like we were silent. It's not like we were quiet. It's not like we were not engaging with them. We were. And now that the president's back at the White House, he's going to have some time to talk to these Democratic leadership on the phone. I mentioned Democratic governors. He's going to do it with leaders on the Hill as well. And that's important. And then he's going to go back out into the states, obviously, and talk to Americans there. So he's going to do both.
What's his message going to be to the Democratic governors and Hill?